What's up, guys? Today we're going to be talking about some of the best older flagship smartphones that you can buy for around the $300 price point here. So let's go ahead and get started with the OnePlus 9. Now, you can find these like locked to T-Mobile for $250, and an unlocked version you can easily find for around $300. And I absolutely love this phone when I first got it. It has a pretty nice design on here. It does have a plastic frame with a glass back, but it still remains has kind of like that premium feel to it. It is IP68. The T-Mobile version only though, and then you also have a pretty nice display. It's a 6.5-inch fluid AMOLED display. It is 120 hertz. It's HDR10 plus with 1100 nits peak brightness, and it is also a 1080p panel. 402 for the PPI. So overall, I really enjoy the screen on here. It's completely flat, has the punch hole, gives off some really nice vibrant colors, and I think display wise everything is just silky buttery smooth running on top of Oxygen OS. So this does have Android 12. It will get the Android 13 update. And this phone is very powerful. It has the Snapdragon AAA processor and 128 gigs of internal storage and 8 gigs of RAM. So basically, you are getting still a very much capable flagship device here as far as benchmarks, as far as gaming performance. I did a gaming test on this phone. It does a phenomenal job when it comes to performance. So basically, anything you throw at it is going to be able to run at high settings. Not only that, but I'm a big fan of Oxygen OS. I like how clean and how laid out it is. And this phone does have the stereo speakers on here. The stereo speakers are pretty nice, pretty impressive, good bass, good mids. The under the display fingerprint sensor does work really well on here. So one of the highlights with this phone is actually the camera. So they have a Hasselblad collaboration, and it takes pretty good photos. It's a 48 megapixel standard. It has a 50 megapixel ultra wide. I thought it took some very impressive ultra wide shots. And then you have a 2 megapixel monochrome camera on here. It shoots in 8K 30 with a 16 megapixel selfie that shoots in 1080p 30. I was pretty impressed with the image processing and the Hasselblad color processing and all that good stuff. You have the software in there as well too. I thought it was pretty good, especially for the price that you're paying for this phone. You get some pretty nice shots. I think the pictures speak for themselves really. And then this phone has really good battery life, a 4,500 milliamp battery. I was able to get through a day no issue with this phone. But what I absolutely loved about this phone, it actually came with a 65-watt charger. So this thing charges extremely fast. I was really impressed with the charging speeds on here. You also have wireless charging as well too. So overall, in general, just a very impressive phone. All right, guys, next is the Galaxy Note 10 Plus. This is another awesome phone that you can easily find around $300. This phone offers a lot of value for an older flagship phone. And honestly, some of the other things this phone has you can't really get on a lot of newer phones, like the SD card support and stuff like that. One thing I love about this design on here is that the Aura Glow color on here is just really cool, very mesmerizing color. I always get a lot of compliments on that. It has a very nice modern design for an older flagship phone. Aluminum frames, got a glass back. It's got the built-in stylus on here as well. It's IP68 dust and water resistant. I think the screen is still pretty top notch on here. It's only really missing high refresh rate. It still has a dynamic AMOLED display. It's HDR10 plus at 1440p, 498 for the PPI, and it's a 6.8-inch display. So it's very big, has very good screen to body ratio, beautiful colors, and basically it looks pretty much like the S22 Ultra screen still. Might not be as bright, but basically it's really hard to tell the difference between these two screens besides the the high refresh rate. This phone did get its last major OS update, Android 12, One UI 4.1, and it's been really smooth, really great on this phone. It is currently in its security patches stages, and you also have the Snapdragon 855 on here, and honestly it's still very powerful. It's much more powerful than people actually think. This phone still is able to play games at high settings, Fortnite, Call of Duty, PUBG. I did a gaming test if you guys want to check that out. It did a phenomenal job with gaming, and one of the cool things about these chips is that they actually don't really overheat like that. You also have SD card support on here, which is a very rare feature now. You can really rarely find it in flagship phones these days. It also has 256 gigs of internal storage and 12 gigs of RAM, so you have plenty of storage, plenty of RAM on this phone. The stereo speakers are also pretty impressive on here. You get a pretty loud sound, very good bass quality, good mids and highs on here, and basically all of your additional features are still here as far as Samsung desktop support, as far as all the One UI features, as far as the under the display fingerprint sensor is also very fast. You can use face unlock as well too, so you're not really missing anything as far as the features go. Now this phone does have a 12 megapixel standard, a 12 megapixel telephoto, it shoots in 2x, and then a 16 megapixel ultra wide, and then a 0.3 depth sensor. It also shoots in 4K 60 on the front and back, and it has a 10 megapixel selfie. As you can see from the shots, it still takes some pretty good photos, good dynamic range, good detail, very punchy, sort of color on here. I thought the images are pretty good for an older flagship phone. Now, of course, the newer phones, they got 108 megapixel and crazy zoom, but I think for the average person who is just trying to take a point and click, I think you'll be pretty happy still with the Note 10 Plus image on here. So also another thing about this phone is that battery life is still pretty good. I'm able to get around 6 hours of screen on time, so it's really not bad at all. It has a 4300 milliamp battery with 45 watt wire charging, which is really nice because it charges pretty fast, and then you have wireless and reverse wireless charging on this guy as well too. So overall, it's just a very impressive phone. Like I said, you can find this phone very cheap, around 250 to 300 bucks. All right guys, next is going to be the iPhone 11. So the iPhone 11 is a very impressive phone. So I really do like the design on here still. I think it's still more comfortable than the newer iPhones because of the smoother edges. It's got an aluminum frame, it's got a glass back, it's IP68 dust and water resistant, and overall it's very easy to handle. It's a 6.1 inch display on here. It is a IPS display, and it is a 720p plus display through 2640 ppi. Overall, it's pretty sharp display, so I don't really have any issues with the panel on here. This phone also has the Apple A13 chip, and I think that's pretty much the highlight with this phone. This phone is crazy powerful still. Benchmark wise, it just still does a really great job even compared to some of the newer Android phones here, and it definitely shows when it comes to gaming performance and overall just general performance. Running iOS 16, it really just flies through it. So if you're somebody that needs an iPhone and you like to game, this is definitely a phone for you because it's just a super powerful phone. You also have 64 gigs of internal storage and 4 gigs of RAM. This phone does have pretty nice sounding stereo speakers as well too. You get really good bass quality on here, and overall just generally loud. You do have NFC, and your Face ID is on here as well. That works great. So what I like about this phone is the cameras are still pretty good in my opinion on this phone. It's a 12 megapixel standard and a 12 megapixel ultra wide. It shoots in 4K 60 on the front and back, and it has a 12 megapixel selfie cam. I thought the cameras were excellent on here still. They've aged really well. Like I said, they're very close to the newer phones if you go ahead and watch that comparison. And overall, I really do like the images, good dynamic range. The ultra wide is pretty close to the main lens, and I think the pictures really speak for themselves. I think you get some pretty excellent image quality still out of this older flagship. Now, this phone does have a 3110 milliamp battery, and I'm able to get some pretty good battery life on mine. Even though I have like 85% battery health, I can still squeeze about 6 hours out of this phone. So you do have pretty decent battery life on the iPhone 11, depending on, again, your battery health, and you also have wireless charging on here as well. All right, next is a phone that I think is being seriously overlooked for the $300 price point, the Galaxy S21. So I saw this on Amazon for like $288, and again, these are USA prices, guys. Prices will vary based on the country. But this is a very interesting phone, a very good phone, I think, for $288. Now, this one does have the plastic back and aluminum frame. I didn't think the plastic back was such a bad move when Samsung did it. Yes, doesn't feel as premium, but again, when you buy these phones used, I always see these phones with cracked back glasses. So I like the idea, but a lot of people didn't, so that's why they switch. But this phone does have a pretty good display on here. It's a 6.2 inch dynamic AMOLED display. It's 120 hertz. It's also HDR10 plus at 1300 nits peak brightness, and then you have 1080p resolution with 421 for the PPI. Overall, beautiful display. Nice thin bezels, punch hole. It's the classic Samsung display that we love here. This phone launched with Android 11 on here, so of course you're going to get the latest Android 13 One UI 5 on here. You have the Snapdragon AAA processor on here, so again, this phone is extremely fast when it comes to your daily tasks like multitasking or gaming on here. It'll be able to pretty much blow through anything that you throw at it. You have 128 gigs of internal storage and 8 gigs of RAM. This phone has stereo speakers speakers, which sound pretty good. Great bass quality, overall very loud. And then of course you have all of your extras like the NFC, the under the display fingerprint sensor is really fast, and it has all the bells and whistles like Samsung desktop support and all that good stuff on here. I think the highlights are definitely the cameras on here. You have some still flagship quality cameras on here. It's a 12 megapixel standard with a 64 megapixel telephoto. It does 3x, and then you also have a 12 megapixel ultra wide. It shoots in 8K 24, and then you also can shoot in 4K 60 on the front with a 10 megapixel selfie. So overall, the image quality is going to be beautiful on here. It's pretty much comparable to the S22. I didn't see too much of a difference, honestly. So you're still getting top-notch, high quality shots with this phone, which I think is really great. This phone does have a 4,000 milliamp battery, 25 watt charging with wireless and reverse wireless charging. Overall, my battery experience was pretty good on here. It's pretty much, again, like the S22. Pretty much you can squeeze around 6 hours of screen on time out of here. So I think this is a great bet for $288. Honestly, it's a really good phone for that price. All right, guys, next is the Pixel 6 Pro, and this is such a fantastic device. And I think because the 7 Pro was so good, this phone sort of got forgotten about a little bit, but the price has come down. It's like $300 on the Amazon refurbish, and it's amazing for that price. It's absolutely amazing. So it's got an aluminum frame, glass back, IP68 dust and water resistant. It still has the same, essential design as the 7 Pro as far as the camera bar design. So I think it still looks really good. It's got a beautiful LTPO AMOLED display. It's 120 Hz HDR10 Plus at 6.7 inches. It's a 1440p panel, 512 for the PPI, and I think it's an absolutely beautiful screen here. So it is a very curved display, and which I don't have a problem with. I actually love curved displays, but it's super vibrant, super smooth with the 120 hertz, pretty good screen to body ratio. Runs the latest version of Android, and it gets the same update treatment as the Pixel 7 Pro, so it gets updates extremely fast when they first come out. Clean stock version of Android, all the same features are still on here, running the original Google Tensor chip. And it's pretty impressive as far as the chip on here. Like I said, once this phone actually got the updates, I think it runs a little bit smoother, a little bit faster. It doesn't have so many bugs and stuff like that. So the updates have really helped this phone just be really smooth, in my opinion. You also have 128 gigs of internal storage and 12 gigs of RAM on the base model. The stereo speakers are phenomenal on the 6 Pro. Very loud, very good bass, pretty good mids and highs. NFC is on here. The under the display fingerprint sensor, while it's an optical fingerprint sensor, so it's not the fastest, but it does work fine. You just have to apply a little bit of pressure to it. So the real highlight with the 6 Pro is the cameras are still top notch on this phone. I mean, they're still excellent. It's a 50 megapixel standard and a 48 megapixel telephoto. It does 4x optical zoom, and then a 12 megapixel ultra wide that does 4K 60, and then a 11.1 megapixel selfie ultra wide that does 4K 30. And if you guys seen the blind smartphone camera test with MKBHD, these Pixel phones always do really good. So I would say, I've been saying this for a while, these phones take some of the best steals, I think, in any smartphones, right? Great steals when it comes to dynamic range, Google's AI. As far as color, I really love the color on here. Video is kind of just okay on this phone. It gets better with the 7 Pro, but video is actually just, pretty decent on here. But yeah, those camera steals, low light, good light, doesn't matter, selfies, it's going to take some phenomenal, really good photos, in my opinion. Battery life on here is just pretty average. It's got a 5,003 milliamp battery. This phone typically gets around 6 hours of screen on time. It's got 23 watt wired charging, and then you also have the reverse wireless charging as well. I think this phone is absolutely phenomenal for the price right now. All right, so I do want to throw in an extra one, the LG V60. This is a phenomenal device, and you can find this very cheap, around 200, even cheaper than that, I think, on eBay as well too. But a phenomenal device. This thing is built like a tank as well, and it's supposedly gonna get Android 13 somewhere around this year, so I'm really excited about that. And yeah, this thing has still been getting security patches, and I've been really impressed with that. But it's built like a tank, IP68 dust and water resistant. It offers a unique experience than the other phones on this list, because this phone does have the dual screen case capability, so you can essentially turn it into two phones. It's got a beautiful POLED display. It's HDR10 Plus at 6.8 inches. It's 1080p 395 for the PPI. The only thing it's really missing is any type of high refresh rate, but the display itself is still pretty smooth, and like I said, it's very pretty, and you get the dual screen case to pretty much make up for that. You also have, again, the Android 12 currently on here, Snapdragon 865. Extremely efficient, guys. This phone is very, very fast when it comes to gaming performance and just general performance, bouncing in and out of apps. This phone does not miss a beat. I have a full gaming test if you guys want to check that out. It does have micro SD card support, and believe it or not, it has a headphone jack with a quad DAC. So very, very high quality audio on this phone as well too. So that's why I said very unique experience for a flagship. So having the SD card support, dual screen case, and headphone jack with a quad DAC, you're not gonna find a ton of phones that check off those boxes. It also has 128 gigs of internal storage and 8 gigs of RAM. Very good stereo speakers, pretty loud, pretty good bass quality on here. NFC's on board. The fingerprint scanner is an optical one, so again, you gotta apply a little bit of pressure, but it does work pretty well. And then the cameras, I think, are still pretty respectable on the V60. Definitely can pump out a very good shot, very competitive shot, even with today's flagship phones. 64 megapixel standard, 13 megapixel ultra wide, 0.3 depth sensor, shoots in actually 8K 30 with a 10 megapixel selfie that shoots in 4K 30. So I think, again, you still get pretty competitive and respectable shots with the V60. Good color, good dynamic range, good detail, and I just think it's pretty good. Also, this phone does have support for pin support as well. A lot of people forget about that. The battery life is, I think, another highlight. The battery life is pretty good on the V60. You could definitely get well over 6 hours of screen on time with this phone. So it definitely is a great phone for battery life and excellent standby time as well too. Really, really nice standby time. And it also has wireless charging as well. So check out the V60. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.